Immediately after becoming president, Donald Trump made increasingly staggering, and frequent statements contradicted by irrefutable evidence to the contrary. That's the definition of a delusion. One hangs on to it, insists on it, despite irrefutable evidence to the contrary. This is pink. No, it's not. It's not pink. Today is Saturday. It's not Monday. It's not Tuesday. So for Donald Trump, it could easily have been Tuesday. It could easily be Tuesday. Irrefutable evidence to the contrary in such things as videos, photos, tweets, etc. This is primary source material, what researchers would call primary source material. It's not secondary source. It's not reading the write-up by Nick Kristof in the New York Times. It's not watching what Rachel Maddow has to say. It's certainly not watching what Fox News has to say. It's primary source material. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, as it exists, is based upon words and actions. That's what it's based upon. That is the data for determining. And we all got to see words and actions regularly and routinely. I talk about every morning I have coffee with Donald over his Twitter, which I study every morning. And he doesn't really want to hear from me much, but I've been able to learn a lot in coffee over Twitter. So this compels us to consider whether his psychological disturbance is far, far more severe than what has widely been proposed as merely narcissistic personality disorder, merely antisocial personality disorder, or merely pathological liar. That indeed we need to begin to think about delusional disorder. It's a thing. It's in the DSM manual. It's rarely known. I believe I've come across 2 people who were afflicted in this way in 40 years of practicing. We need to begin thinking about delusional disorder, an exceptionally rare but very real diagnostic category. It's probably not as rare because people who have delusional disorder, and we'll talk about this, it doesn't show up. They can seem charming, they can seem high achievement, etc. And I'll say more about that. But there are more of them out there that come to the attention, I think, of the mental health community. So what I want to use as primary source material here, Donald Trump delivered on the day after his inauguration. Many of you may remember, he spoke at the CIA. Now, the people at the CIA, I think his name is Brennan, who had just retired from the CIA, people were completely outraged. Why is that? Because he spoke before hallowed ground. You remember the stars in the background? Those stars each represented an agent who had died in the line of duty. They couldn't be named for the obvious reasons. And it was like having a Rolling Stones concert at Arlington Cemetery. That's the level, and people were absolutely furious. He brought 40 of his own staffers. This is very well documented. 40 of his own staffers, and he claimed as he left to loud rock music that outside there were thousands more, and there just wasn't room for them. He filled the rows with 40 loud, raucous staffers in the hallowed sacred hall of 117 commemorative stars. Late in the speech went on for about 15 minutes. Late in the speech, and this is what we're going to look at, in barely more than 2 minutes, he made 3 egregious, separate, and absolutely dropping statements, despite irrefutable evidence to the contrary, that everybody knew. He says it in such a way that if this is the nature of delusional disorder. He just kind of says it, and you kind of think, well, maybe, and just kind of cruises past it. They are comments that could easily slip by unnoticed were it not for my own intense focus on trying to make sense of the nature of his faults. It is something that has been very much at the forefront of my mind since the summer of 16. So if we imagine, here's the thing to think about. If we imagine that he were hooked up to a reliable lie detector test, all right, let's imagine that it's a lie detector test that actually figures out whether the person is lying or not, and that he were hooked up to it. I believe he would have passed with flying colors. Let's see what you think.
I believe that this group is going to be one of the most important groups in this country toward making us safe, toward making us winners again, toward ending all of the problems. We have so many problems that are interrelated that we don't even think of, but interrelated to the kind of havoc and fear that this sick group of people has caused. So I can only say that I am with you 1,000%. And the reason you're my first stop is that, as you know, I have a running war with the media. They are among the most dishonest human beings on earth.
Those are his staffers.
And they sort of made it sound like I had a feud with the intelligence community. And I just want to let you know, the reason you're number one stop is exactly the opposite.
Okay, so what do we have there? He's coming to the CIA and he's saying, hey, you know, the fake news media has made all this stuff up. Anyone sitting in the audience immediately turned on their cell phone, gone to his Twitters, and seen dozens and dozens and dozens of tweets saying they blew it in Iraq and the so-called intelligence community, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Disparaging beyond belief. And so now what we have here is he's saying exactly the opposite, and that it's all about fake news. And look at his demeanor. Does he look like he's a man who's trying to hide something? Does he look like he's lying? In my opinion, this is the first of three delusional statements that he makes. He believes them. If he were tied up to a lie detector test, he would pass with flying colors because he believes them. Okay, go ahead.
Exactly, and they understand that too. And I was explaining about the numbers. We did a thing yesterday, the speech, and everybody liked the speech. You had a so I've been giving it, but we had a massive field of people. You saw packed. I get up this morning, I turn on one of the networks, and they show an empty field. I said, wait a minute, I made a speech. I looked out. The field was, it looked like 1.5 million people. They showed a field where there were practically nobody standing there. And they said, Donald Trump did not draw well. I said, it was almost raining. The rain should have scared him away, but God looked down and he said, we're not going to let it rain on your speech. In fact, when I first started, I said, oh no. First line, I got hit by a couple of drops. And I said, oh, this is too bad, but we'll go right through it. But the truth is that it stopped immediately. It was amazing. And then it became really sunny. Then I walked off and it poured right after I left.
Okay.
Wow.
So, yeah, it would be funny, except for the fact that, does he look like a man who's lying? Not to me. He believes every word he is saying. And again, turn on the cell phone right there as he says that and look at the videos. Here's not one word of that is accurate. It's all false. He says, you know, he points up to his buddy and says, you know, God looks down and says, Donald, I'm not going to let it rain on your speech. So clouds parted, it became bright sunshine. I finished the speech, and then it downpoured as I left. None of that happened. None of that happened. It was a kind of a misty scenario. You've probably seen it. He starts speaking. Many of us kind of got a kick out of George Bush trying to get the poncho over his head. It started 2-3 minutes into the speech. Bright sunshine never happened, and it never downpoured. Okay? That's a delusion. That is a delusion. So that's 2. Let's go to number 3.
Poor, but you know, we have something that's amazing because we had, it looked, honestly, it looked like 1.5 million people, whatever it was, but it went all the way back to the Washington Monument. And I turn on, and by mistake, I get this network. And it showed an empty field. And it said we drew 250,000 people. Now that's not bad, but it's a lie. We had 250,000 people literally around, in the little bowl that we constructed. That was 250,000 people. The rest of the, 20 block area all the way back to the Washington Monument was packed.
It wasn't bad. We've all seen the photos. He dealt with the National Park Service. See you later, Art. Thank you for coming. Good luck with it. So he badgered the National Park Service, which is in charge of that. That is a national park where the inaugural speech was made. And he badgered he thought it must just be the angles. It must be the angles. So he was looking for what in his mind wasn't fakery, but what the truth was, that it was packed all the way back to the Washington Monument. So as I'm sitting there in front of my TV listening to this, my jaw hits my chest. And it occurred to me that he believes these things that he says. He believes he knows more than all the generals. He believes he will be the greatest president except maybe Abe Lincoln. This is not bombast. This is not arrogance. He believes these things. And there are other examples that I'm going to talk about. So delusional disorder is what I would call a stealth disorder. It is exceptionally beguiling and very difficult to understand because such individuals can seem normal, they can seem logical, they can be high functioning and even charming, so long as the core delusion of grandiosity in this case is not challenged. When it's challenged, that's when you start to see the weird stuff surfacing. Did he see that? Could he have possibly meant that? But by and large, charming, high achievement, funny. He's supposed to be a great guy at a party with his sense of humor, etc. As long as he's not groping your wife. So I think it's far more difficult to comprehend than any other psychological disturbance. We all, when we talk about narcissism, well, we all have a desire to feel special. There are times when we can become boastful. Sociopathic behavior. We all stole a candy bar at Walgreens when we were 6 years old. We all have months where we will tell a lie, and sometimes it's not just a white lie. So we can relate to that. But a schizophrenic person who we see on the street, unmedicated, and we know from a block away that this person is not well. Very, very different. Those things we can kind of get. We can get serial killers because of the stuff we see on TV. We can kind of relate to it. This is very difficult to relate to because you have such a disparity between what you see on the surface and what exists underneath that leaks through at these times. Very wounded when he felt, he thought he had the greatest, and his competitiveness with Barack Obama, we know about that, and the fact that he did not draw better than Barack Obama, for him was crushing, and it did not comport with his view of the world. And so he twisted. Delusional disorder is chronic, even lifelong. Here's the point, folks, and tends to worsen in adulthood, middle age, and beyond. And so we can see where the more success that he had, I could go out onto Fifth Avenue and kill someone and my polls would go up. The more success that he had, it escalated this grandiosity and this sense of detachment from what goes on in the real world. Words and actions are consistent and logical if the basic premise of the delusion is accepted as reality. Because I am superior to all, it follows that I would never apologize because I am never wrong. Has anyone here heard him apologize, ever? So did he actually believe that the truth was defined by his words and not hard, indisputable facts to the contrary. Why would he merely lie, despite knowing that each and every person in attendance could look at their cells and immediately verify, etc.? His stunning falsehoods. He is much more Kim Jong-un than Vladimir Putin. Vladimir Putin, we could think of as crazy like a fox. All right? It's shrewd, it's calculating, it's effective, and you don't know what's happening until it's over. Versus Kim Jong-un, where at least to all appearances from some of the just batshit stuff that he has done and talked about, Kim Jong-un has elements, as Donald Trump does, of crazy like a fox, but it's more crazy like a crazy, like a crazy. He takes it as a given that the world around him will conform to his own warped view of events, and that those who do not are irrational enemies backed by the fake media. Now just think about all the shifts with Reince Priebus. He was good. Oh, no, he's got to go. Jeff Sessions, he was good. No, he's got to go. Oh, wait a minute, he's got to stay. Rex Tillerson, the legendary battles with everyone around him who might dare to cross. So I previously compared, when I was still wrong, Donald Trump's psychological reality prior to the election to an intense video game in which objects on the screen were friend or foe to be dealt with accordingly. Again, I was wrong. How was I wrong? With a video game, however intensely engaging it might be, the gamer is looking at a screen. The screen is out there. The person can hear the doorbell ring. He can see that it's raining and I need to close the window. He can look at a clock and realize he's got to get to a meeting. So it's deeply engaging, but it's out there. There's not full-on immersion, okay? So for Donald Trump, we have to think about Oculus, the goggles that people they'll flinch and they'll try to wipe stuff away, or they might reach out after something, is very, very deeply engaging. But Oculus is continuing to develop. There's still audio there, where someone can say, listen, we gotta go, and you can hear it. Oculus, in all its cleverness, is developing now the audio component, which goes over your ears. They replicate sound that would be in a room. There is no music. There is no entertainment factor. It is complete and utter immersion that takes you away. However sane you are, it takes you away from the reality around you, and it becomes a virtual reality. I think that imagery helps us to understand what goes on with Donald Trump. Friend or foe, nothing in between. And some other examples. The Central Park Five, black and brown teenagers in 1989 who were wrongly convicted and railroaded into jail. Trump was furious. He took out full-page ads in 3 of the New York newspapers calling for the return of the death penalty because of these kids. So they were railroaded into jail, and 9 years later, the guy that really did it, who was in jail for rape, confessed. His DNA matched the DNA at the scene that was suppressed by the prosecutors looking for a high-profile convict. He knew things about, the tall grass and dragging in and behind the tree, et cetera, which could not have been known by someone who was not there. So, but meanwhile, these poor kids, their lives had been ruined, spending 7, 8, 9 years in jail before this happens. To this day, when asked about it, Trump pounds the table and bellows, no. They're guilty. They had a fair trial. The police say they're guilty. They're guilty. I don't care about all this other stuff. They're guilty. Okay, that's a delusion. Another one that we all know about, the Muslims celebrating the collapse of the World Trade Center. It's not like he said that and then changes it. He sticks with that over time. That happened in 2001, I'm sorry. And it did not happen. It simply did not happen. TV reports, newspapers, what was it? I think the town was Newark. Yeah. It didn't happen. Okay, there are facts. Again, it's Saturday today. It's not Monday, it's Saturday. Okay? No. It's Monday. And that's how it is. And everybody else needs to bend their view of reality to conform to mine. The term solipsism comes from philosophy, not psychology, but it appears extremely relevant to this discussion. The best definition of solipsism that I've been able to come across really captures it. Quote, solipsism is the belief that the person holding the belief is the only real thing in the universe. All other persons and things are merely ornaments or impediments to his happiness. People don't exist outside. It's just like with Oculus, right? So things are floating by and you're using the controls, zip, zap that one, pull this one in closer, et cetera, et cetera. Solipsism. All right, let's wrap this. So, with eye-poppingly real holographics, the gamer's reality is all that is, not when using a video, but when using an Oculus. People are not people. They have no independent existence in their own right. Melania is an ornament, and he treats her like an ornament. They are merely allies or enemies, ornaments or impediments. This is the delusional reality of the man we have elected the most powerful on the planet. We see what's going on in the last 10 days. Prudy and I were talking about it. The man is melting down. He is melting down, and the things that he is doing are beyond description.